acetylcholine. So we're deviating just a little bit from the flow of the handout, but that's okay. Acetylcholine is another small molecule transmitter. It's not an amino acid, but it is a small molecule. And acetylcholine has very important activity both within the central nervous system and outside of the central nervous system. Outside of the CNS, it's the major excitatory neurotransmitter of our somatic motor neurons. So this is the neurotransmitter that's released on muscle fiber, leading to the contraction of muscles. It's also a major excitatory neurotransmitter in autonomic ganglia, and it's also the neurotransmitter of many postganglionic parasympathetic fibers. Within the brain itself, it seems to have an important modulatory role that may be important in various cognitive functions such as attention. Just as an example of how one such small molecule neurotransmitter might be processed, let's take a closer look at a cholinergic synapse. And so we have this illustrated here in figure 6.2. And so within the presynaptic compartment, we've got the metabolic machinery that's necessary for producing acetylcholine. In this case, acetylcholine is synthesized by an enzyme called choline acetyltransferase from acetyl-CoA, one of the products of oxidative metabolism, and choline, a dietary compound that's important for various aspects of nutrition and brain health. Well, acetylcholine is synthesized in the presynaptic terminal, packaged into synaptic vesicles, and then released in a calcium-dependent fashion. When acetylcholine is in the synaptic cleft, it can interact with postsynaptic receptors, which can be either of the ionotropic or metabotropic variety. And once acetylcholine has been released into the synaptic cleft, it can be degraded by an enzyme called acetylcholinesterase. And when that happens, the choline portion of the molecule is taken back up into the presynaptic terminal and recycled. To learn more about the function of a typical cholinergic synapse and how all this works, you might want to view animation 6.1 on our website. Now, before moving on to the biogenic amines, let me just back up a moment and talk about the other important amino acid neurotransmitters that we skipped over, namely the two at the bottom here, GABA and glycine. So GABA is short for gamma aminobutyric acid, and it's a metabolite of glutamate. So glutamate is in the biosynthetic pathway for GABA. Glycine is a different amino acid. Now, both of these amino acids typically have inhibitory activity in the mature nervous system. We'll come back and say quite a bit more about GABA as we go, but for now, let me just highlight that GABA is the single most important transmitter in the brain that mediates synaptic inhibition. Glycine is a very important neurotransmitter, especially in the spinal cord, where it likewise mediates synaptic inhibition. Glycine also plays an important role at synapses that release glutamate, where glycine serves as a co-transmitter whose binding is important for the activity of one type of receptor for glutamate. Okay, so now we're ready to move on to another class of small molecule neurotransmitter. These are the biogenic amines, and these include molecules such as dopamine, norepinephrine, epinephrine, serotonin, otherwise known as indolamine, and histamine, based on yet a different type of carbon ring structure. So these are all amine molecules that are linked to some kind of a ring type of structure. And they all have biological activity in the nervous system that tends to modulate the activity of neural circuits. So unlike molecules like glutamate and GABA that mediate rapid synaptic effects that appear to convey information as information flows in neural circuits, the biogenic amines rather modulate the way those circuits function. And we'll talk more about them when we see them in context in structures such as the basal ganglia of the forebrain. But it's worth emphasizing here that these substances are very important in motivation and reward systems, such as the compound dopamine. Dopamine is also critical for modulating movement in circuits such as the basal ganglia, and it's involved in activation of circuits in the prefrontal cortex. This is very important in helping to mediate various aspects of cognition. Likewise, norepinephrine is also very important in cognitive functioning. It seems to be part of what it means to pay attention, is to have a heightened release of norepinephrine, along with other molecules such as acetylcholine. Another important small molecule transmitter among the biogenic amines is serotonin. And together with dopamine, serotonin and dopamine together seem to account for many of the diagnostic categories that we encounter in psychiatry, in the human behavioral sciences. In fact, most of the drugs that are prescribed to treat psychiatric illness act on modulating the activities of dopamine and serotonin synapses in the brain.